evening, everyone. Once again, free will, huh? It's one of these things that if we go out in the world, in our society, and start asking people, do we have free will, yes or no, we get all kinds of answers. Because we are going to find people who are 100% believers of determinism, and on the other side we have 100% believers of free will and anything in between. So there's not a common sense, there's not a consensus about this. It's very complicated. It depends on a lot of things, but basically it depends on the level of evolution of each one of us. And that's what we're going to try to explain a little bit. In the Spirit's book, there's a section about free will where Kardec has about 7 or 8 questions. So part of what we're going to speak about here is based on that as well. But it all starts, if we start, so the question is, do we have free will, yes or no? And it's going to depend on our level of evolution. If we look into the top level, the higher place possible, which is God, as we go down in level of consciousness, we go down, to angelicals, humans, animals, and so and so and so, we start losing, or this idea of free will starts, it disappears. It is so that the animals, plants, and minerals don't have any. And within, like humans, same thing. As you go down in level within the human world, not all humans have the same understanding, because not all of them are at the same level of consciousness. A higher level of consciousness, you will bring the idea that I have more free will. We're going to explain that, how it works, but it all depends on the level of evolution. So animal, plants, and minerals don't have any. If we look into the why is that, okay, where does it come from? Why are we given free will? Okay, if we look into the evolution of the kingdoms, okay, mineral, all the way from minerals to angelicals, for each new kingdom that comes in, okay, for example, we have plants replacing the minerals and so on and so on. So for each new kingdom, new attributes are put in place. So there are some attributes that the plants have, but the minerals don't. There are some attributes that the animals have and the plants don't, and so and so and so. So for every new one of these kingdoms, there's something new that comes with it, some new attributes. When we get to the animals, there is one attribute that is called instinct of preservation or conservation. And what this is, we can see this. You go look at a safari or images from a safari, you can see that happening right there. The lion goes over to a gazelle, she starts, just trying to protect herself. She will flee or, try to do something. That's the instinct of preservation. It's very clear, very solid for us as humans to see in animals. Now this thing gets passed over to us. We do have, the instinct of preservation. If somebody comes in here with a gun, we're going to hide. We're going to do something. We're not going to say, yeah, shoot me. Because that's part of our instinct of preservation. If a lion comes in here, we're going to just, find a place, supposedly safe place. So we're going to get away from it. That's part of our instinct of preservation. For us to be able to deal with this instinct of preservation, 2 other attributes were added to us here, humans. Okay, these attributes is, you might think this is strange, they are pride and selfishness. And you go like, what? Yeah, it is, because when we think of pride and selfishness, the way we know today, the way we speak of it today, it doesn't make any sense, but this is what it means. What we consider today pride and selfishness, when I say the words and you think of people being selfish and so on and so, that's not the original idea behind it. We made it so. The original idea is, let's just say a lion comes in here, okay? Huge lion is like roaring. I don't want to be in front of him. Okay, so I need to be selfish enough to hide. I'm just going to go hide somewhere. In that moment, in those seconds or maybe those minutes, I'm going to forget about you temporarily, because the minute I see the lion, I'll just flee. There's no thought to this. It's just instinct. I'm just going to go. Okay, maybe when I'm in a safe place, I'm going to try to help some of you, but my first action is just flee. And I'm being selfish. But this is what this selfishness here means. It means this: protect myself from, from things that can happen to me. Also, pride. What is pride? When the lion comes, I'm gonna say to myself, between me and the lion, I believe I'm better than him and I can flee. I think I'm better than him. That's what pride is for here. Now, the problem is this: if somebody comes in here with a gun, okay, I'm gonna go away. I'm just gonna hide. Now, this is selfishness. Now think about this. If I think, nobody's here with a gun, but if I think that somebody could come into my house with a gun and shoot me, it didn't happen. There's no reason to happen, but I'm considering that it could happen. So what am I gonna do? I'm gonna go buy guns myself to protect myself from something that is not happening, from something that might never happen. That is the wrong approach to selfishness. That is the selfishness that we practice today. That's not what this is. So we took selfishness to a whole new level. We took pride to a whole new level. And it made us what we are today. So that's why today in our current society, what are the two problems that we have? Spirit's book. Pride and selfishness. Because we made, out of these two things, we made what they are today. And it creates a lot of trouble for ourselves. Because now we can't deal with this. So when it gets to the human kingdom, we were given another attribute that allows us to properly deal with these two things so they don't get out of hand. Okay? The name of this attribute is free will. Free will is a faucet. You know, a little faucet that you open and close. You let go or you close it. It's a little faucet, so I control my pride and my selfishness. When the lion comes in, I need to be selfish, 100%. But when somebody comes here to talk to me, yeah, let's listen to them instead of imposing my, my ideas and so and so and so. So the way I control pride and selfishness is through this little faucet. The name of this faucet is free will. That's where free will comes in place within, the context of all these things. And then, like I said before, Kardec has a bunch of questions about free will. I'm just going to take some of the ideas on these questions. So one of them, 843, right? Do humans have free will? Straight answer. If you think, you do. If you can think, you do. We think. We are humans, so we do have free will because I can think. All right? And then when Kardec is putting his ideas in the Gospel according to Spiritism about blind faith, faith that you just believe it for no reason whatsoever, blind faith. So he puts this phrase here. Obviously the spirits are helping him put the text together. Blind faith is no longer appropriate for this century. Which century? 2 centuries ago. In 1857, maybe 56 or 5, when he was writing this thing. So it wasn't appropriate 2 centuries ago, okay? Even worse today, okay? And it is precisely the dogma of blind faith, the dogma of blind faith, that produces the greatest number of disbelievers. Because the dogma of blind faith imposes itself and requires people to, the abdication of these two things here, reason and free will. What is blind faith? This is the way it is. Why? You can't ask. This is blind faith. It is because it is. It is because I tell you so. So if you just buy the idea, if you just go by it, you're leaving reason and free will behind. You're going to process somebody else's ID as of that point. So, now it becomes 3 things. Free will now becomes 3 things. There are 3 parameters to it. Faith, reason, and free will. And these 3 things are together. If you touch one, you touch in the other 2. So on all belief systems in which faith is blind, people are going to have a hard time with free will and reason. If most of us came from a different belief system, okay, where faith was blind, when you get in here, It opens up the minds and the doors for a whole different type of life because it touches these two things. I can do things that I couldn't do before. And why couldn't I do before? Because they told me so. That's what blind faith is. So free will has to do a lot with which belief system I'm buying. So in the beginning, we were trying to balance determinism and free will. What we're going to do here is, if we ask in the society, we're going to get all kinds of answers. If we ask within the Spiritist center, do we have free will or determinism? Same thing. Maybe the ideas are not going to be so distant, but same thing. Different people are going to refer to different levels. So us as Spiritists, what do we do when you don't really know something? You study. So we're going to study determinism. We're going to study free will and take conclusions out of this. This is how we do. This is the Spiritist way of understanding things. Why are we so into this deterministic world where everything is material, deterministic? Because of history. If we look back in history, that's exactly what it is. So I'm going to put a timeline here. We're going to start in about 1700, okay, with Isaac Newton. Newton was a great guy. We couldn't have most of what we have today if it wasn't on board at one point as a mathematician, scientist, researcher, whatever you want to call him. But he had his ways of doing things. And his great question was, how does the universe work? That's what he was looking for, this answer. In order to answer this, he had to go through a lot of things, study different things. He discovered gravity and other things. But his whole idea of things, we can put together in 3 lines. This is told by himself. The 3 lines are materialism. How does the universe work? I'm only interested in how planets refer to planets. I'm not interested in God, spirit. No, nothing like this. I'm not interested in studying that. That was his point. Okay, that was his focus. So materialism. It only matters what is matter. Number 2, reductionism, where you study things by considering the whole and you keep breaking down until you get to the problem. This is how we do in a car, for example, right? I told you already here. If you're going to go to your car, you turn the key, nothing happens. Okay, we got a problem in the car. Where is the problem? You start eliminating. It can be the wheel. It can be the windshield. It can be the seats. And you start eliminating. You get to the point. When you get to the point, you replace that part. Anything in our world, in humanity, that is based on Newtonian physics follows that. That includes conventional medicine. You go breaking down the parts and you get to the point, you replace the part. That's called transplant. It doesn't matter what's going to affect within the body. That's how we do medicine, conventional medicine today. And number 3 is determinism, meaning if I understood something, I can predict all about it. For example, weather. Do we know everything about weather? No. We can predict most of it, but not everything. So we know a lot about weather, but we don't know everything yet. Some tornadoes take place, and how come, right? So that's his idea. This is what he brought to us. So it's very, very focused in matter. There's nothing about spirit, there's nothing about soul, nothing like this. He wasn't interested in any of this. And this is in the early 1700s. Then later on, about 100 years later, a huge group of scientists, one after the other, come down based on the original Newton's ideas, developing, what's going to be the Industrial Revolution 100 years later. And these people, the most important of them is John Dalton. He was studying the atoms, structure of the atoms, and he starts to pose questions to the church. The church is the provider of the truth in these days, okay? And he would go to the church and say, well, you tell me the world is created in 7 days, so which one of these days was the giraffe created? And the church is like, you can't ask that. And he would say, that's a dogma. So he was very frontal and brutal about his ideas. But anyway, after him, a lot of scientists got into the same bandwagon. They said, this guy is good because he's challenging the church. The church doesn't have any answers. So the church is not all of that we think it is. That's the thought at the time, 200 years ago or so. And then Charles Darwin in 1859 writes his famous book, The Origin of the Species, where he then will explain why the giraffe has such a long neck and all of these things. And here, the provider of the truth changes hands. It used to be the church, now it becomes science. And science is still the current provider of the truth. It changed because of him, because he was the one proposing the answers that the church couldn't do. Now, if you think about it, science is having a very hard time answering to a lot of questions. Right? What kind of provider of the truth is this that doesn't really have all the answers? So we are looking into a new provider of the truth, all of us. And it's going to be something like us. It's going to be something spiritual. Because the answer will not come from anything matter-based. Anyway, he threatens the church, and things continue. Materialism continues. In 1953, James Watson and Francis Crick here in New York discovered the structure of the DNA. That's how we approach genetics from here on in a whole different way. We think in these days that we understand everything. We got control of everything. We know all the genes, so we can control the human body. That's what they think it's going to happen. That's 1953. And then, more recently, we got something that I'm going to talk about later. It's called the Human Genome Project, in which what we do is we take all these genes that Crick and Watson identified, and we thought about this. Let's make a list of all the genes and what they mean. For example, there's a gene that defines the color of my hair, and this is gene number such. And there's one that defines the color of my skin, and so and so and so and so. So we wanted to find out which gene does what. I'm going to come back to this a little bit. Now, these things here, this is pretty much materialistic. There's nothing spiritual here. But there's one incident in 1939 that would have changed everything if it was considered by science, if it was considered within the scientific world. That's Emmanuel. In 1939, before the DNA story, before anything, we already knew DNA, genetics, but we didn't know the physicality of genetics. We knew how to combine genes, how to genes combine and the results, but we didn't know everything yet. In 1939, so before the gene thing, Emmanuel comes and tells us this: the laws of genetics are presided by numerous psychic agents out of the material world. Okay, that science on Earth is far from formulate because of their postulated materialistic postulates. What it's saying is you're taking the wrong road because you're assuming something that is not truth. Those things that you're assuming, he calls materialistic postulates. What are these materialistic postulates that Emmanuel is referring to? When Watson and Crick in 1953 discovered the structure of the DNA, they had a point. This point they called, this is their name, not mine, the central dogma of the molecular biology. And you go like, calm down. The word dogma is not used by any scientist in the world. These are incompatible words, science and dogma. But these scientists, they gave us this name, dogma. So the central dogma of the molecular biology, what does it do? It means we found out how the DNA works, but we're going to tell you this, and shut up, don't ask anything, because I'm going to tell you that genes can be changed. You cannot change the genes. Now, science tells us that genes define physical aspects, but they also describe behavior. So, for example, if I'm aggressive, there's a set of genes in there that make me so. And if they're telling me that I can't change, there's no way I'm going to be less aggressive one day. I was born this way, and I'm going to die this way. So it's absolutely useless to make any effort trying to get better. That's what they're saying. That's the dogma of the molecular biology. It's a pretty strong statement, and obviously it's not truth, like we're going to see. So when you combine the central dogma of molecular biology with all the theory of Newton, we got into something that is known as genetic determinism, which basically is you are held captive of your genes. That's it. You can't change. If you're ugly, you're going to be ugly. If you have a nice voice to sing, you're going to be a great singer. If you have mother instinct, you're going to be that way to the last day. Don't worry, you don't have to do anything because you're not going to change. That's what genetic determinism is. Like I said, it's pretty strong. Now, what is exactly behind this genetic determinism? In 1966 and 67, when we started cloning cells, the scientists were baffled by one thing. They thought that the nucleus of the cell, which contains the DNA, the genetics, was the brain of the cell. If you put me on a surgery table and you take my brain out, I die. They would think that the same thing happens to a cell. You put a cell in there, you take the nucleus out, the cell is going to die. That's what they expected in 1966-67. In order to do cloning, you have to remove the nucleus. They would remove the nucleus and nothing would happen. The cell would continue all its functions and all its behavior. And that wasn't right for the time. The belief is it can't be. So there's something else that we don't know. That goes to Newton's determinism. If you know, if you understand, you can predict. We couldn't predict. Things were happening and it wasn't according to the books, the science books. So that's one thing. The second thing is, when you look into identical twins, if they come, according to science, if they come from the very same combination, genetic combination, okay, at birth, right at birth, one has a scar here, the other doesn't. How do you explain that? And science doesn't really have an explanation. They can give you guidelines on what to think about it, but they don't really have an explanation. Only 34% of the cases are considered explained. That's not enough, because that's not where the reason, the explanation is. And finally, something that challenges genetic determinism is the Human Genome Project. I started talking about it. Let's talk a little bit more. So the idea is, we have all these genes in the body. I want to know which each gene is for. Because if I know, and the gene is doing, quote, the wrong thing, I can fix it. I can do something, or I can try to, do some medicine, some surgery, whatever. I can try to fix it. So that was a great idea. It was all countries got together. Each one had, scientists working for it. It was a huge thing, huge project. The idea is very good. So this is the idea behind it. We knew, and we still know, that we produce about 150,000 proteins in our body. Each protein is made based on a gene. So there's a gene that produces the protein. That's the belief here behind this. So if I have 150,000 proteins, I have 150,000 genes, each one producing a certain gene. When we go look into the results, what happens is, out of the 150,000 proteins, we only had 25,000 genes. That means at least one gene produces more than one protein, at least one. And that means it's not the gene's decision. Somebody has to tell the gene, now you're going to produce this, and somebody has to tell the gene, now you're going to produce that. So there's a control above that. So the fact that genes control gets very challenged. They are controlled. One of the interesting things about this project is, in order to have a return on investment, as the project was going along to make it faster, a lot of the drug companies, what they did is they put a lot of money on the project with this idea behind. Let's say the initial pharmaceutical company, and I'm going to quote, buy the group of scientists that are analyzing genes 1 through 10,000. Let's just say that. So I'm putting money on this group, okay? Other companies are putting money in other groups. And the idea behind this, when I get the list of the 10,000 genes that I'm buying, okay, I'm going to know how to fix things. For example, let's say one gene here is a type of voice, okay? And then I can go to my doctor and say, doctor, I want to be a singer, but my gene is bad. So he's going to give me a medicine that's going to fix my voice based on changing my genes. That's the idea behind it. So what these pharmaceutical companies did, they patented the genes. So our genes are patented by the pharmaceutical companies. They don't belong to us. That's how far we went in determinism. Now, with time, the project ended because obviously 25,000 genes generating 150,000 proteins. The genes don't control anything. They are controlled. So the project puts an end to determinism right here. But the pharmaceutical companies patenting these genes, and they are losing the patents. Year after year, there's, they're being revoked because it's absurd. The last I heard was about 2 months in Italy. One judge, he revoked 4 patents for an American company that have bought genes. So that's how far we went. It's absurd. It's laughable. But that's the truth. That's the reality we are in. So this puts an end to determinism. That's one side of the thing. The other side is free will. Okay, how do we look into free will now? And then we're going to check both of them, analyze and see what we get to. So we're going to look into free will based on these 5 things here. First of all, let's start with codification itself, where Kardec is going to tell us this. Question 847. This is actually the text, part of the answer by the spirits. Those whose intelligence is impaired by any cause, okay, are no longer in complete control of their thought. So they don't have free will anymore. You see, that's the blind faith that he was talking. So when I can't think anymore, when I'm processing somebody else's idea, I lost my free will. So my free will is not cut by a pair of scissors. It's me letting go. Here's another passage. In humans in primitive state means level of evolution very low, okay, but still humans, not animals or anything like this, still humans. In those cases, instinct is dominant over will. So instinct mandates over free will or will, which does not impede their acting with entire freedom on certain things. And then he says this: more evolved spirits are more responsible for their acts, because more evolved spirits have higher free will. They have the impression that they can do more. So there's more responsibility attached to it. We're going to see how this thing relates to each other here. Free will and the ability to do things. Okay, I'm going to talk about this a little bit. Okay, influences. We are all subject to influences, both spiritual and material. Okay, material influences are something that we can easily detect. We can see. You go to, Facebook or you watch TV. Those are material influences. People pounding ideas on you. Those are easy to find out they're happening. But the problem is the spiritual influences. We don't really detect, and if we're not smart enough, we're just gonna take the wrong side of the road. Now, in the book The Mechanics of Mediumship by André Luiz, he explains something very interesting. He explains about what he calls physical reflexes. Physical reflexes are divided in 2 parts. There are two types: congenital or acquired, unconditional or conditioned. Unconditional means it's already part of my nature. It's already part of my automation in a perispirit. Okay, for example, my stomach starts working because I'm eating. I don't have to stop everything and, oh, stomach, come on, work, because I'm going to eat. I don't have to do this. It's part of my automated process. It's in my perispirit. So those are unconditioned reflexes. The conditioned ones are the ones I'm going to learn. I got to think about it. The conditioned ones, I need my brain. I need to think about them. I need to learn. Oh, I need to learn this. For example, charity. Do you think Jesus had to think hard to do charity? It was natural for him. It isn't for us. Because when we do charities like this, even material charity, oh, the guy is asking for food there. He's asking for money to buy food. But that money he could use for drugs and this. You see, the brain is in action. That's not what Jesus would do. So I'm thinking, I'm considering, I'm reasoning through the process. That requires my cortex, my thought, okay? It's not unconditioned. It is conditioned. I'm putting the conditions. This guy could do this, could do that with the money. So André Luiz concludes saying that all physical reflexes that are conditioned, those that I need the brain, that I need to learn, all of them, It's written in there. That's not me. That's the text in the book. All of them are governed and guided by induction. Induction is spiritual influence. So everything that we do, all the influences that we have, are guided by induction. So it depends on how much I let this influence takes over. It depends on my thought. If I'm thinking of going to the bar every night, I'm going to have a certain type of result. If I'm thinking of coming to the Spiritist Center every night, it's a different type of result, and so and so and so. It depends on us. Okay, it doesn't depend on anybody else. It's not a lotto game. It's my responsibility. It's my free will that decides it. In the book Posthumous Works, Kardec, this book is written by Kardec when he was alive. When he died, they got the information he was writing on and all the text he left behind. They composed the book. The book is this. This is not Kardec as a spirit. Okay, this is his work in life. And he talks about several things. It's a great book. It's a wrap-up of Spiritism. But when he talks about free will, he puts this text here. We got to go slowly on this thing, okay? So I'm just going to read it. Through the assimilation of pure spiritual fluids, the spirit identifies per se with the person whom it wants to influence. So he is talking about a discarnate spirit influencing somebody incarnated, okay? So the discarnate spirit, not only transmits its thoughts, but it could impose some physical action. It could make me do something that I wasn't really planning to do. More, make him or her act or speak under his will. Make him or her speak what he wants. Forced to speak. Make use of the person's organs as if they were its own. So, for example, I need to drink. So I'm going to get somebody that has the physical parts that allow me to drink because I need that sensation. And I'm discarnate, I need the sensation. So I'm going to use somebody else's organs. Smoking, same thing. Okay? So make use of the person's organs as if they were its own. It could at last neutralize the actions of the person. That's when depression kicks in. That's depression. Okay? The modern day word for this is depression. And finally, it says here, paralyze free will. This thing is strong. This thing is serious. It can paralyze free will. What happens to a person with depression, which is one level up? It's not the latest, not the last level. The person doesn't feel, the guy is in depression, he doesn't feel he can do anything. He's like, yeah, I can't do anything. That's it for me. And it gets really hard because they will seek, suicidal thoughts, different ideas. They will just lay down in bed and never want to get up from here because they lost entirely the ability, the idea, the concept, the perceived concept that they have free will. Okay, so it's very serious. Now, those are spiritual influences. Now, material influences. If we look at the level of evolution, moral progress, okay, as we come along this way, meaning people with more moral progress this way, less moral progress that way, okay? When moral progress is not really developed yet, the influence of the material world is very high, okay? At the tip there, it's almost 100%. It's not 100% because there's a spirit animating the body, but it's almost 100% when you first start the human incarnations. Everything in the material world will impact the spirit. And the other way around, when you get to the tip, to the very tip here, the influence of matter over this spirit here is almost zero. Because when it's zero, I don't need to incarnate anymore. So I'm up to the next level. So I don't get back to incarnating all the time. So think of somebody, for example, like Chico Xavier in Brazil. He couldn't be that way because the influence of matter on him was almost zero. He suffered abuse and, tips of lighting cigarettes on his stomach and all kinds of things, and he was hit by all means. By science and psychological profile experts, he should have been a psycho, big time. By psychological standards, he wasn't. So the influence of the environment, the material world, on him was very light because he was all the way up here. What was the influence of matter on Jesus? Nothing. He goes to the cross and still, hey, forgive him. So he's all the way up this way. Okay, so something interesting, starts getting to our minds. It has to do, again, we come back to the same thing. It has to do with our level of evolution because of the influence of the matter. And then the spirits are going to tell us that we start as simple and ignorant and we go all the way to perfection. We know that. In order for us to study this, the spirits and Allan Kardec, they group the spirits in levels of evolution. They give us a list of 10 levels, which are these. We're not really going to get into this, but we start all the way down as impure, and we keep coming up and up and up and up until we get to the pures. Okay? The first 5 levels, Allan Kardec asks the spirit permission to call them imperfect spirits. The permission is granted. Then the next 4 are called good spirits, and the last one, there's only one class, pure spirits. We are in the imperfect. We are third order spirits. Most of us. Of course, there's 1 or 2 which are second order, but most of us, we are on third order. And what is the difference then? Well, here is. Third order, material world dominates over spiritual. That's us, okay? Prone to do evil actions. Every opportunity that we have to do something evil, we do. Not necessarily at a conscious level, but we do. Prideful and selfish. Spirits in the second order, good spirits. The domination doesn't come from material world. It comes from the spiritual world. There's still influence of matter, but it's not dominant anymore, like on our case here. Prone to do good actions, not evil actions. So good is always the default. And in our case, evil is always the default. Combination of knowledge and virtues. They know how to do this. It's not that we don't have knowledge and virtues. We have a lot of knowledge. And we have virtues. We just don't know how to combine. We have a lot of technological knowledge, and we have virtues. So what do we do with the technology? We put a plane against the building. So we don't know how to combine our knowledge and our virtues. And the pure spirits are completely out of the influence of the material world. It doesn't touch them. So we all start here, simple and ignorant, and we go all the way up to perfection. Now, it's interesting because some of us are going to go up on a straight line very fast. Some of us it's going to be a hard line. It's going to take a long time. Allan Kardec asks the spirits, why? Why some of us are like straight up and the others are very harsh line? And the answer is because these guys here, okay, in black, they stop on every opportunity they have to do bad things, to do evil. I'm walking, here's an opportunity to do something bad. Stop and do it. If you stop, you're not walking anymore. So you're delaying your own process. And then Kardec says, but why do they do that? Why do they stop to do evil on every single opportunity? So he asks that on question 121. And the answer is, well, don't they have free will? It's free will. Here's an opportunity to do evil. I'm going to do it. Nobody's forcing me to do anything. It's my own choice. Okay? It's me and myself. That's it. Okay, so that's about where it starts. We start to get a conclusion here of all these things. There's a relationship. We start to feel that there's a relationship between free will and selfishness. There's a direct relationship. And the relationship is this. More selfish people, okay, very selfish people, don't think they have any free will. People who are not selfish, they think they have a lot of free will. For example, for most of us, let's not consider us here in the Spiritist Center. society. We go to somebody and say, can you do some charity here and this for free? There's going to be a lot of thought before the answer comes out. And this and this and this and this. Because could I do this? Could I do that? You see, the person is checking the free will. What's my calendar saying? What's my mom saying? You see, the free will is not free. It's not happening. Because if you ask Divaldo Franco, can you go do some charity? Where is that? No blinking. Yeah, where's that? Give me the address. I'm going to go right now, as fast as I can. Other people, they have to think, because there's a commitment to selfishness, which takes away the commitment from free will. If you look into the other way around, people who consider determinism, they are this way. So more selfish means less free will, which is perceived as deterministic. So people who are very selfish, they think everything is predetermined. I can't change anything. I don't have the ability, that's the perception, I don't have the ability to do anything. Everything is preset. Okay? So the ones who are on that side, okay, the ones who are on that side, they are doing charity, they're doing the good works, they're helping people, they are volunteering on good deeds. They are the ones that we should all be. Now, those who are here, okay, on this side, these are the ones bringing planes down. These are the ones doing mass killings, doing school shootings. These are the ones killing 12 people in a magazine in Paris. These are the ones that don't see any way out. Everything is predetermined. I have to go there and kill those kids. Why? Because there's no other way. They told me so. They told me so means there is no free will. I don't give myself a choice to, hold on, why should I go and kill? No, it doesn't even cross their minds. That's it. Yeah, let's do it. Because the level of selfishness is so high that they don't see any other way. Yeah, that's it. We got to do it. So there's a direct relationship between free will and selfishness. So every time we think we don't have free will, think on the other part. I'm being selfish. If you think, yeah, I wanted to do this, but I can't, and this and that. Maybe I can't because I want to do it my way. And I should do in a different way, slightly different way. So that curve tells us a lot, okay? All right, so those who are down here, responsibility will get to them because of their evil actions. They don't see any way out. They do things. They're going to have to account for it. They're going to be accounting for it. So there's a question in the Spirit's book about the responsibility, and this is what the Spirit says. When the Spirit incarnates, it brings a certain predisposition to do things. And what he's saying here is, it's not the organs that I have that make me do so. For example, it's not that because I have a great eye, great sight, that I'm going to be a great killer. It's the other way around. I am a great killer, and now I'm going to develop my organs that will let me do this. A firm hand, better eyesight. So what he's saying is, it's not the organ that makes me who I am. The organs will develop according to who I am. Okay? All right. Now, this is personal responsibility. Now, collective responsibility. Kardec asks the spirits. Here, what an interesting question. I think about myself. If I have to sit down and talk to Kardec on an argument, I wouldn't even try. I would just walk out. Yeah, you win. I wouldn't even try. Look at this. Does the distortion of the intellectual faculties because of drunkenness excuse reprehensible acts? The question is, I go out to the bar and I drink and I do something wrong. Okay, should I be excused because I didn't know what I was doing? That is the question. The answer is no, because I got drunk because I wanted to go that way intentionally. I deprive myself of the reason, so I commit two crimes. For us, it's very easy to understand. All you have to do is ask this: did I go to the bar or the bar came to me? If you tell me the bar came to me, I'm totally innocent. If you tell me you went to the bar, I'm totally guilty, and there's no in between. It's that easy, right? And also the spiritual tells us that children have free will, but they have to be administered by the tutors or parents. Because what is free will, coming back to the beginning, is the faucet, right? Is a little faucet. Kids don't know how to use the faucet. They don't know how to control that. Somebody has to teach them. Who teaches it? The tutor, the parents. Now, I can only teach what I know. All right? If I don't know how to use the faucet, I'm going to teach him or her the way I know. So I need to learn first, because I don't want the responsibility, the collective responsibility that I made my son, my daughter this way because I didn't know. That's collective responsibility. It's somebody else paying for what I didn't do right. Okay? All right. And science, we saw that science stopped with determinism. They understand it's no longer a thing. Now, what do they think about free will? Is there such a thing? Do they talk about free will? Yes, they do. They study it deeply. And this is studied by neuroscience. Okay, when we started studying neuroscience, understanding how things work in the brain, that the brain is a series of neurons, one after the other, transmitting the information, we got into something very interesting. These neurons, they come close to each other to pass the information from one to the other, but they don't touch. There's no physical touch. That's an interesting thing. It's something like this. This is one neuron here, okay, with two terminals. And this is another neuron that comes down here. This is another one that comes down here. They do not touch. The information is passed along in a very strange way. And that's how we start to understand how free will works. It works like this. An electrical signal comes down the neuron. When it gets to this point here, okay, this has bags of liquid, tiny, tiny bags of liquid, okay? When the information hits in there, it will break the bags, so the liquid leaks, okay? When it leaks, it goes over to the other side. The other side is another of these terminals that will detect the liquid, convert back to electrical signal. At the other end, it goes through the same process. So look at how complicated this is. Electricity, becomes chemistry, passes over, chemistry becomes electricity, again conversion. And then you say, well, that's complicated. And the worst of all is there are 72 bags here. When the pulse, electrical pulse comes in, which one of the bags open? You see, it's the same neuron all the time, but it will act differently depending on the signal. So the neuron is not the one making the decision. The decision comes from a higher level. You're going to open a bag number, let's just say 1, 2, and 5. And next time it's going to be 12, 15, and 34. There's somebody making that decision. The decision is not done at the material level. And that's where science got to. It became very disturbing for them because of the standards used by science to understand things. So these chemicals are called neurotransmitters that go from one neuron to another. Now, it gets even worse because if you look at, it's within the body of the neuron is electrical, between the two is chemical. Now, it becomes very complicated because if you look at this, for example, okay, let me show you something here. For example, this. See, this neuron here is going to approach this and they're going to trade information. Now, you see how many possibilities you have here? Let's say we have about 100 of these little legs. Okay, they're called dendrites, legs. Okay, and this guy here also has about 100. So let's make it simple. Here's one neuron with 5 little legs. Here's another one, 5 little legs, and they're going to touch. Now, it could be like this, but it could also be like this. It could also be like this. Can you see the number of possibilities? Right? What controls that? It comes from above. Okay? Not only that, this is 1 neuron, 2 neurons only. We have 2 billion. So we are all ready for free will inside our brain. At times we're going to choose this At times you're going to choose this. At times you're going to break some of the bags. Other times you're going to break some of the other bags. It is so that we don't make the same choice for the same thing all the time. I can come in tomorrow and say, I'm going to have a yellow shirt tomorrow. Nice. But I don't have a yellow shirt every day. The day after, I want to do blue. If I was hardwired, if I didn't have free will, I wouldn't do blue. I couldn't, because I wouldn't be allowed to. But I allow myself to use yellow today, blue tomorrow, pink the other day, and so on and so on and so on. Okay, so it's a very interesting thing. Now, when science went deep into studying this, that's how it all concludes right now. They did an experiment in 1980. That's a very long time ago. The results are still the same today with all the technology that we have. This experiment was very simple. They were trying to determine when the brain knows that it has to pass a command to, let's say, the muscles. So the original experiment was they had several volunteers, and you can do this today, the result is the same. Several volunteers, they were told to move their wrist like this. That's why the picture shows this, okay? And they were measuring with, in the 80s, well, all we had was electroencephalogram, where you had those electrodes, and you would just, the pen would move in a piece of paper, and it would show activity. So there's no activity, it would be flat. There's activity, it would move. So the doctor would look and say, oh, there's activity in the brain or no activity in the brain. So they were trying to determine when the brain becomes conscious about the fact that it has to do this, okay? So here's the results. So they said, well, there's going to be a certain time, okay, where the brain becomes aware of it. They gave this supposedly time. They gave this name, readiness potential. It's potential where the brain is ready to send the command. And they said, well, how long is that? How long does it take for the brain to actually send the command? And they measured that, and that was absolutely astonishing. Half second. If you think about the speed of our brain and thought, and you consider that it takes half second for the brain to send information to the muscle, it seems like a lot, even in the 80s. If you do this with the current technology, you get the same number. It's not lack of technology that led us to believe that. It still is. So they said, well, it's kind of strange. So let's try to determine exactly what time the brain becomes conscious of that decision. So they said, well, it's going to be sometime here before the readiness potential, because the brain is going to do something. When they go to measure that decision that the brain is going to take, the decision comes after it. So it doesn't make sense. How come the brain becomes conscious of a decision after it was ready? First you decide, then you get ready, then you do. That was the line of thought. But it wasn't this way. So they said, well, there's something before this controlling everything else. It's not material. It's out of the material plan. So here's what they thought. Let's measure the time that it takes for the brain to become conscious. And they measured. It's 350 milliseconds. If you take the difference, that leaves about 200 milliseconds here. Okay? Think about this. This is serious. After the brain has a conscious decision, there's still a time frame of 200 milliseconds in which I can change my decision before I move my hand. This 200 millisecond here allows for the possibility of vetoing the action. I can veto. I can say no. And this is science. This is not. It means I have free will. That's how science proves and accepts that there is free will. We saw that how determinism died. Now we see how free will raises up within the academic science. That's very interesting. This study is very deep. It's not the point being studied right here. We just need to know what the consequences are.
Do you know the name of that study?
Yeah, there's a whole book about it. It's called The Mind and the Brain by Jeffrey Schwartz. Yeah. He is one of the guys involved in the experiment. The original experiment in 1980 is by Dr. Lee. Okay.
Who's making the decision on the back before the mind and breath?
Right. So in scientific words, they are looking for what part of matter is making that decision, and there is no part of matter because the decision is based on quantum physics. It's not Newtonian physics. It's quantum physics. So who is studying this thing right now? Quantum physicists. They are the ones studying this. Quantum physics is about possibilities and probabilities, totally different than regular physics. So think about this. The science that studies possibilities and probabilities. Look at that. Does it make sense? I'm making different decisions every time. I'm doing possibilities, probabilities. So quantum physics is studying that right now. So we go out of the, per se, medical or clinical or whatever you want to call, or neuroscience, brings in quantum physics to help, getting all this thing together. All right, so let's get some fast conclusions here. First of all, Spirit's book. Just wrapping up what we saw. The spirit is influenced by the matter. We know that. Why? Because of my level of evolution. It is harder on certain people will see an ad on TV. You gotta buy Levi jeans. They rush to the store and buy. Some other people, oh, I wish I could. Some other people, oh, it was on TV. I didn't even see. All right, that's how bad it is for certain people. If the advertise saying buy it, they'll go buy it. Okay. Number two, the faculties are both intellectual and moral. Both of them will develop. So both of them will help us regain free will. As I go along and I progress, I will regain my free will. Okay, number three, those who suppress their thought in order to occupy themselves with matter, material things, become like an animal. Even worse, they no longer think about being on guard against evil. So they don't think evil can get them because they're all taken care of, right? It is in this that they become capable. I can't read it because it's too far. Let me see here. They become culpable. Yeah, culpable because they are in this matter of their own free will. What does it mean? It means when I devote myself to material things, I stop thinking. I stop thinking. Because thought is not material. If I'm devoting my thing to material things, I stop thinking. And I'm going to lose my free will. This is a very famous ladder of things. If you start from the bottom, and it has to do with the level of evolution. When you are all the way down in evolution, I won't do it. And then I can't do it means it changes a little bit. I can't. But, I don't want to do it. It's changing. It's getting better. Right? I don't want to do it. How do I do it? I will try to do it. Yeah, I can do it. I will do it. I've done it. That's exactly what free will is against the level of evolution. And we wrap up with this thing, which is the most important image I think we have to take home. How do I get from here to there? There are two ways, right? I have to raise up, right? How do I get more free will? Well, I'm going to wait for God to give me a raise, just like a boss, right? As of today, you have more free will. You got 25% more free will. I'm going to be sitting and waiting because it's not going to happen. That's not how I gain free will. I gain free will by going away from selfishness. The path towards the yellow phase in Spiritism is called moral transformation. That's how we call this thing in Spiritism. That's what it is. It's how I get from here over there. Okay? So thank you very much. You all have a good night.
The Spirit's book, written by Allan Kardec, is the initial landmark publication of the Spiritist doctrine that has made a profound impact on the thought and view of humanity. It is divided into 4 parts and has 1,019 questions asked by Allan Kardec, the codifier of Spiritism, to the higher spirits. It rationally and logically presents the teachings of Spiritism and their scientific, philosophical, and religious aspects. This and other Spiritist works are available at ediceiofamerica.com. That is EDICEI of America.com. Thank you for watching.